Welcome everyone. I'm Bridget Cook-Burch and I am so excited and thrilled to bring you Michelle REITTInger and her brand new book. So Michelle, tell us the name of your book and tell us what it's about.
It's called The Upside of Bipolar, 7 Steps to Heal Your Disorder. And it advocates for a radical shift in the treatment of bipolar, utilizing a research-based integrated method that helps to get to the root of what's causing the symptoms and heal the cause so that you heal the disorder.
And that it's so powerful, and it can sound almost academic, but this book is not. It has a lot of research and a lot of things that you did look into in terms of your own life story, but it also encompasses your own journey. Will you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. I was diagnosed with bipolar in 1998, a month before I graduated from college. And when I was first diagnosed, I went directly to the psychiatrist. You know, I was trusting that they knew what they were talking about and pursued the treatment plan that they had given me. And I just continued to get worse. I suffered tremendously for the first 10 years after my diagnosis. And I took every medication I was prescribed, you know, went to therapists, I did everything I was told to do, and it just kept getting worse. And I got to a point where I had a breakdown. And when I had that breakdown, I felt hopeless. I felt like there was no hope for ever getting any better. I was doing everything I was told to do, nothing was improving. And I had an experience that is shared in the book that turned things for me, that changed things for me. And so when I wrote this book, I realized how important it was to help people understand my story, understand what my experience was, so that you knew where I was coming from. And I feel like so many people have similar experiences. I have a podcast that I talk to people on a regular basis that are suffering with the same challenges. And so in my experience with healing my bipolar, I didn't even realize I was healing when I was going through that process. And so each time I found a tool that helped me along my path to healing, I just thought it was helping me cope better with what I was struggling with. But when I finally got to a point where I realized that I'd healed, where I was not experiencing symptoms anymore, I realized what I had found. And then I started doing research, and you know I love to do research. I started recognizing that the tools that I'd found were not unique, and they were research-based. You know, I had found them just kind of stumbling around trying to discover, you know, what could I use to live better. But the tools were all based in research. There was tons of research showing that they were effective in actually treating the underlying causes of my symptoms. And so what I had found wasn't a fluke, it was science. And so in my book, I share not only my story, but I also share the research that helped me recognize that these tools are effective in helping people treat their bipolar, treating the underlying cause of the symptoms, rather than just treating the symptoms with psychotropic drugs that can actually make things worse oftentimes.
And as you were working through this, what were some of the surprising things that you discovered about yourself as you were writing down your own story?
Well, one of the things that was interesting is in my treatment, they had administered electroconvulsive therapy, which is called shock therapy for a lot of people, and it had messed up my memory. And so there were parts of my experience that were hazy. And when I was wanting to write the book, I wanted it to be very authentic and truthful. And so I went and dug through all my boxes and found all my journals from that time. And rereading those journals for me was really eye-opening for me. I'd forgotten a lot of the things that I'd struggled with. I'd forgotten about some of my attempts. You know, I had made attempts on my life and I'd forgotten about some of them. And all of those things came back. And it helped me recognize how far I really had come. You know, I think sometimes when you heal from something, it starts to kind of dull the pain of the experience. And so going back through it was actually a very cathartic experience for me. It was very healing, and I developed a tremendous amount of compassion for my younger self that I didn't realize I needed. You know, there's one of the things that a lot of people who are struggling with bipolar struggle with is shame and guilt for the things that we do when we're, you know, experiencing mania or depression. We feel a lot of sadness for the things that our loved ones suffer, you know, at our hands, and sometimes just as bystanders. And as I went through and re-experienced my life journey as I wrote it, and the healing path, it helped me develop a tremendous amount of compassion for what I went through, for the experiences I had, and for the experiences my family had. I fell more in love with my husband as I wrote the book, because I just was so grateful for his support, through my life and through my healing experience. So
yeah, we fell in love with your husband too, from what you wrote, which is great. And it was beautiful to see, after some foiled relationships, that you found someone who absolutely treated you with respect and dignity, and also stood beside you, which is fantastic. Yeah, that's good writing, when the reader falls in love with your love.
He's a good man.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You had some struggles in the beginning to determine what you wanted to write and how you wanted to write it. And then all of a sudden it seemed like a switch was flipped for you. And it was like every single thing that you wanted to gift to the reader. So would you share what that was like for you, but also, like, how did you become in tune for what you want them to experience?
Well, I think the first thing was it had never occurred to me to write a book, honestly. Over the years, I've had times when people have said, you should write a book. And I always thought, what would I write a book about? That just was such a foreign concept to me. And when I started my blog, most of it made me very nervous to be that vulnerable, first of all. But I kept thinking, what would have helped me when I was younger? And I started writing to my younger self. Sorry, I'm getting emotional about this. But I started writing to my younger self. And when I first started writing the book, first of all, it seemed like an overwhelming task. And so I think I didn't really understand how to write a book that would be helpful to people. This isn't a vanity project at all. This is something I felt almost compelled to do. Once I started thinking about it, I thought, I feel like I need to do this. And so as I was writing, I started thinking, what would have helped me when I was younger? How could somebody have helped me in my story? And so it became easier, because I started thinking more along the terms of what would help somebody that's suffering in that way. And to be heard. I think one of the things that's the hardest thing is just feeling like nobody understands what you're going through. And there's so many negative feelings and emotions about that experience. And so I thought, in order to help people understand that it is possible to heal, they need to know where I came from. And so it made it easier for me to make myself vulnerable to people and to share what I went through, because I shouldn't feel shame and nobody else should feel shame. This is just part of the human experience. We shouldn't feel ashamed of it. And so then it became easier. Then it became easier to be vulnerable, to open my experience up to people. And I had to be very careful, because the people that I'm writing to are, a lot of us are very wounded. And I didn't want to trigger people. I didn't want to cause more pain. And so that was an interesting tightrope to walk, because I wanted to show myself in all honesty, but at the same time not cause pain for people by triggering their own issues.
Right. So having that balance.
Yeah.
And so it's beautiful in you receiving feedback on your book that you have reached that balance, because she compels people with her story, but she doesn't take them too low. But we also understand that whole process. In fact, there is a scene that I absolutely love. You have to buy the book. However, there is a place where you feel one of those psychotropic medications taking place inside your brain. And it's interesting, when I've talked to other people who have read your book, that was one of those scenes where they're like, oh, I understand, or I have lived this, or that's exactly what I felt, or I didn't experience that, but that feeling of being out of control. So you were open and honest about that, despite former shame, former guilt, other things. Did you find the writing process also helped you to just completely annihilate those former negative feelings?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I've done tons of therapy as I've gone through my healing journey. And one of the things that they often encourage you to do is to write, and it's amazing the catharsis that occurs when we write. And this was a more intensive experience because I was not only trying to write my experience, but write it in a way that could bring other people in and help you understand what I went through. And that was not easy. It was a challenging thing to take myself all the way back into that experience, because in order to communicate it in a way that other people would be able to understand what I was experiencing, I had to relive it. But it was extraordinary. It was a very hard thing to go through in the moment, but at the end it was like it was all gone. It was all healed, and just it was easier to talk about it even afterwards, because that process of writing and reliving it in some ways helped heal completely. I thought I had healed, and then having to go back through it, was a deeper experience. It was pretty extraordinary. So writing the book for me actually helped me in so many ways, and I thought, well, if nothing comes out of this but what I get out of it, I think it will be worth the effort. But I'm looking forward to this helping other people as well.
Who do you want to reach, and how do you want to reach them? Because you have poured yourself into this book.
Yeah, I think when I first started understanding that I was healing and that it was possible to heal, I felt betrayed. I felt very angry. And it made it hard for me to keep wanting to do what I was doing, because I was so upset. I was so angry about the time that I felt like I'd lost, for all the damage that it did to my life. This treatment approach that approaches my bipolar as if it's a disease. But then I started thinking, this doesn't do me any good. Like, it doesn't do me any good to kind of wallow in my anger and my frustration and self-pity. What can I do with this? And I want the people that this is written for, I'm writing to you that is feeling the same way, that's feeling hopeless, that's feeling the idea of this being a chronic thing that you have to deal with for the rest of your life. I had so many days when I just thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I would get out of bed and I'd be in a depressive episode, and every day was just like a fight to just keep wanting to breathe. And simple things like taking a shower was like a gargantuan effort. And it was that idea of just like, oh my gosh, not only am I having to do this now, but I'm supposed to do this for the rest of my life? How am I, why do I want to keep living if that's the way that it is? Now that I'm on this side of it, and I know that it's possible, it feels like climbing a mountain and getting to the peak and thinking, oh my gosh, look at what's possible up here. Look at how beautiful this is. And wanting to guide other people up to the top, saying this is possible. You don't have to live with this for the rest of your life. You don't need to be chronically ill and on medications and suffering forever with this. You can heal.
Which is so beautiful. And you had a couple of extraordinary experiences in which you knew that you were not alone, that there was a bigger meaning for your life. And one of that was to be that mom. Will you share with us a little bit about what you experienced, where it was like, I can continue forward because there's a bigger vision than what I can see in this moment? Yeah. Will you share?
I love my husband and I love my children, but one of the key figures in my life was my daughter, even before she was born. And I think sometimes, especially when you're struggling with mental illness, you struggle with feelings of worthlessness. You feel like your life doesn't have value, like you can't contribute anything because all of your energy is just going into surviving. But learning how to look outside yourself, for me, it was this idea of wanting my daughter to have a happy life. I didn't feel like my life had value, but I knew hers did. And she saved my life, literally. The desire to be better for her, the desire to give her what I felt like she deserved as my daughter, kept me going. Even when I was, felt hopeless, even when I felt like there was, nothing was ever going to get any better, I was willing to just keep suffering for her. But thankfully, I didn't have to just keep suffering. I got to a point where I thought the best I can expect out of life is just learning how to suffer well with bipolar. But I finally got to a point where that wasn't necessary anymore. And my favorite part of the book is the joy that I experienced in her later part of her life, that I got to be there, for her successes and her her triumphs and grateful that I kept trying, grateful I didn't give up.
Because the joy and the triumph on the other side, I mean, you can see how she shines, which I absolutely love. And that is like this polar opposite of what so many people feel like that they have to stay there for the whole rest of their life. And I love that step by step you walk us through these different areas that were able to help you. And what I think is so remarkable is that you decided to do the research. Like you refused to stay stuck, and you decided to do the research, and you would go to the top every time. It's like, okay, here's this area. Who is the best? Who really knows their stuff? And then you incorporated that into the book. Will you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. And it's interesting, when I was first finding these tools, it almost felt like breadcrumbs on a path. and I was just trying to figure out how to utilize the tool in my life. But when I decided to start sharing what I had learned with people on my blog, I thought I need to know more about this. In order for me to feel confident in sharing what I've learned, I felt like I needed to know more about why it was effective. I didn't know why it was effective, it was just helping me. And so I started researching, and you know, I love to read books, and I love, you know, I was, even when I was really sick, I was trying to read self-help books to fix myself. And so I would find books and the people that had done the research. You know, I haven't done research other than, like, I haven't done studies on each of these tools, but I don't need to, because the research is out there. And as I discovered it, it was so fascinating to me that we have research in each of the areas that people need to heal, but we just haven't put them together. And we haven't recognized that this is actually helping the healing process. It's all about the biggest problem that we have is this disease mindset. You know, this idea that bipolar symptoms indicate a disease, and they don't. They are information, and we have to learn to decipher the information our brain is giving us and figure out what our brain's asking instead of trying to shut it up. One of the favorite analogies that I have is that if you had a really, really high fever and you went to the hospital and asked for help, you know, 105, 106, that's dangerous. You can have brain damage from that. They would give you something immediately to bring the fever down, because we don't want the immediate damage from the fever. But then you don't say you have fever disorder and we're going to put you on this anti-inflammatory for the rest of your life. We're going to figure out what caused the fever. That's the body in distress, and it's asking for help. And it's the same thing with the symptoms of bipolar. They feel scary because nobody likes to have, you know, the symptoms of mania where you're irrational and think you're the queen of the world and you're going to, you know, be the president of the United States, you know, or the depression where you just cannot function. Nobody likes those experiences, but they are symptoms of an underlying distress. And that was one of the things that was so fascinating to me as I started researching and understanding that there's science behind each of these things, is that, you know, there are biological elements to what's happening with us. There are emotional and, you know, psychological elements. And as you go through each of the simple 7 steps that I teach in my book, you can identify what is it that your brain is needing in this area, and how do I give it what it needs so that we resolve that source of symptoms. And gradually, as you go through the process, you heal. It was extraordinary to me to realize that I had healed. I don't experience the symptoms anymore. If I went to a psychiatrist right now, they'd have a nice chat with me, but they wouldn't diagnose me with anything because I don't have the symptoms anymore.
Which is so fantastic. And one of the things I absolutely love too is just that explanation, so that it comes home to the reader in such a remarkable way, especially those who have been told, you know, lifelong diagnosis and so much shame and guilt for past relationships and mistakes and situations and things like that. You have this beautiful way of walking us through what it's like, but then also here's things that actually do help to heal your brain. And I found, even as I was discussing things and you would share, this is what I found and how I found it. Even in my own life, I haven't experienced a lot of mental illness. I've had depressions, and I can be manic at times when I'm working on a project, but it was like, The symptoms are information for your brain. And it gave me permission to not run away from certain things, but to actually take a look at, oh, what is my brain telling me that I need? And how can I supply that? And then it just dissipates all of the emotion and the anxiety and other things, just like you express in your book.
Well, it's really empowering. I think one of the hardest things about the first decade of after my diagnosis was this feeling of helplessness. I felt very helpless. I felt like a victim. I felt like things were happening to me. And it was a terrible way to live because I could see the damage it was doing in my life. I could see the damage it was doing to my relationship with my husband. I could see the damage it was doing to my children. And this feeling of helplessness, like I had this disease that and the medications weren't working. And so that's the thing that I love most about what I've experienced is the way that I've been able to take back control of my life and be responsible for myself. And that is one of the most important things that I hope that this book will do for others is empower them to take responsibility for themselves and empower them to heal, empower them to recognize you don't have to be a victim anymore. You don't have to be at the mercy of these symptoms. This isn't a disease. It's a disorder that is, there are symptoms that are indication of an underlying distress. If you can learn to interpret what that underlying distress is, you can heal.
Which is fantastic. In fact, you have a tool that I think will help so many people in this book. And I know you use it in your practice. You use it, you talk about it on your podcasts and other things, but it's this mood cycle survival guide. And it is exactly what it says, but it is information that a person can gift to themselves and understand themselves better and then manage symptoms much more quickly and be able to do things. And that's just one of the powerful tools that you have in this book. So I'm so excited for the reader to be able to experience this. Share with us, what is the hope for your reader? What is it that you're really expressing that is possible for them?
That they will choose not to be a victim, that you can help yourself. We have tremendous power to heal within ourselves. One of the things I'm very grateful for doctors. I am not anti-doctor. I have a brother who's a doctor. But we have, in our society, have developed this idea that when something is wrong, that somebody else needs to come fix it. And that's not true. We have tremendous power within ourselves to heal. And as they go through the book, they learn different tools that they can start applying in their own life. And it's a gradual process. One of the other misunderstandings we have in our society especially about mental health, is that there's some kind of magic bullet pill that you're going to take that's going to make everything go away. Not only is that not true, it's extremely dangerous because we're complex human beings and we have a lot going on. And it keeps us stuck when we're waiting for that one pill that's going to make everything better, it's going to make everything go away. And so that's the other thing that I look forward to people getting from this book is the understanding that the path to healing is a journey that you take. And I'm at the point where I don't have symptoms anymore, but I've gotten so excited about this journey of healing and self-discovery, and that it doesn't feel like a chore. It doesn't feel like I'm trudging along this path anymore. It's like, okay, what else can I learn? Like, how else can I level up? And I think that's one of the things that I also look forward to people experiencing from the book is this freedom to be your true authentic self and to grow into who you were meant to be rather than being bound up in this prison of mental illness.
Yeah. And what an extraordinary juxtaposition from prison to an extraordinary life. That is a beautiful gift that you're giving to others, Michelle. Thank you.
Absolutely.